Hi there, this is Jake again. This is number 5 in the DM Deep Dive series, helping you get more out of your games and using your games to make more friends. How do you handle player infighting? This is a loaded question. It depends on how it came about. For example, John says that he's pissed off that his monk just can't compete with the damage output of the warlock in the group. Iggy. I think we can all agree that, at least in 5e, this is true. We can see what to do about it, help John figure out how to make his monk unsucky-er, and maybe even let him make a different character. This is one kind of infighting that is easy to resolve because the players may feel jealousy or frustration with another player, but it isn't truly the player they're upset with. It's the fairness of the situation, and they just want to be able to shine. It's also possible for a player to get pissed at another player because of what their character did in-game. This is easy to resolve in most cases by reminding the upset player that they can respond in character to what happened, and they should. This falls apart, however, if the instigator is actually trying to antagonize the people around the table and it has nothing to do with how his character would work. No, it's never happened to me. Why do you ask? In that case, you would need to use some clear, calm communication. I'll lay out those steps in a moment. The only difference between these steps and what you would have to do is that you would be one of the two arguers, the two participants. Players can fight about all sorts of things, but it all comes down to general interpersonal communication skills. If someone is upset, we need to find out first what they're upset about, why, and then what they think they would like to fix it. No matter what, clarity is necessary, and emotions that are heightened past the point of reason are just going to stand in the way. Emotions are important because they are a reflection of who we are. They become present when a situation or concern that matters to us occurs. In those of us who are less aware of those emotional changes, it can easily and quickly result in misunderstandings, arguments, or fights. Before we go over the specific steps to resolve this, let's talk about entanglement. You can't moderate an argument or conflict if you become part of that argument. If someone has an issue with you and that comes up during the settling of the argument, it can be addressed later and in fact needs to be. If one or both of the parties lose their belief that you will act as impartial mediator, then you have just lost a great deal of influence on the conversation. Just like taking tools out of your hand. Airing the problem. The first goal of any heated interaction is to learn what the real problem is. In order to do this, the first action to take, like in first aid, is usually to control the scene in order to facilitate better communication. Sometimes that means having all arguing parties and yourself move to a different room or channel if you're doing your game online or maybe even outside. I used to do that. Tell them that you're glad they were willing to work on this together. Allow person 1 to talk while asking for person 2 to hold their responses until person 1 is done speaking. After that, it's fair to provide the same care to person 2. Go back and forth this way until the real issue becomes apparent. This will likely take a great deal of clarifying from an impartial party, you. As GM, everyone at the table has agreed to play your game and submit to your rules and guidelines. If the GM says something, all the players listen. It may be subconscious, but they will listen to you. If they don't, they know that they may not be able to continue playing the game they love. Clarifying. Clarify. Clarifying questions. You can ask what each person is feeling. If they are unsure of what they're feeling or how to articulate it, it may be best to put a hold on the conversation until each person can more easily or even more clearly articulate their feelings, opinions, perspectives, and thoughts. It's here that I'll explain the perfect sequence of interpersonal communication stages, which is unlikely to ever happen perfectly, but it's important to be aware of the goal so we can try to steer the conversation back that way if things start to derail. No DM wants things to derail. There are 5 stages of interpersonal communication according to Jake. The first stage, create message. It's during this part that we think about what we want the other person to know and think about it carefully. Constructing a message is easily the most difficult part of any of this if emotions are currently heightened, because you have to try to set the intensity of the emotion aside while taking from it the lesson of what bothered you and what you need. Then you need to carefully word a message so that it won't be misunderstood. It's okay to take your time at this stage. Though if you're so emotional that you can't even think of anything to say to begin to self-edit your response or your message, it's probably a good idea to ask for a few minutes of silence to calm down. Like, I need to calm my nerves to make sure I say what I mean to say. Can I take a few minutes? That'd be a good way to put this if you wanted an example. Or even if you didn't, I guess it's there now. Second stage, send message. When doing so, the more emotion neutral the message, the easier it is for the other person to understand, and the less likely they are to react emotionally. It's usually best practice to avoid making you statements and instead to make only I statements or neutral statements. Like instead of, you were mean to me, you could say, I felt hurt by your accusatory tone. Or even, it seems like saying, repeat what they said, must mean that you think I'm a moron. The word you really isn't necessarily off limits here. The goal is just not to say something that would be easily reacted to, and starting off a sentence in such situations with the word you tends to be easy to overreact to. Expect that if you are mediating an argument and you try to guide your friends along this path of communication, there are going to be some failures here, especially if this is the first time your group has done this kind of communication. I know it might be overkill, but if you're completely new to these people, it might be a good thing to tell them this info at the beginning, that you will try to guide arguments through the stages of interpersonal communications with which you're familiar, and if they want to understand what that looks like ahead of time, you can explain it in brief, or show them this video. I know it seems like too much to have to do, but if there's one loose cannon in your group, people a month down the line or several months down the line might part ways with you and the rest of the group because of someone being disruptive. And this is a way to address it. The disruptive person is almost never the one that leaves. It's usually the good people. Or the not disruptive people. You can also let your group know up front, either at a session 0 or when an argument begins, that you'd like it if you could help with the argument if it gets out of hand or confusing for someone, but that you aren't requiring involvement, that you just want to help. Third stage, repeat message. Now this is a test of whether or not the message receiver was paying attention to the words that were used, to the perceived emotions of the sender, to their own emotions, whether they were trying to create their own message at the time, or they were mentally interrupting in some other way. Mental interruption. Mental interruption is when someone is talking to you and you look like you're paying attention, but you're actually just thinking about something else entirely, usually thinking about what you are going to say in response to whatever the hell they said. That's right, you don't know because you weren't really listening. So repeat message isn't just a parroting back of words. It's also not talking about the sender's emotions and how they seemed while sending the message. It's an opportunity to show the sender that you were paying attention and to tell them the message you think was sent. If someone said your cheeseburger looks like shit and you replied, "Do you want some?" that doesn't really show that you took in what the other person was saying. It shows that it didn't really matter to you that they said anything at all. God, that is a pet peeve. Obviously. So repeat message is telling someone what they said in a way that you might say it, reinterpreting it, so that it seems like you truly received that message. Not just that it was spoken at you and you can repeat it word for word. That's not helpful in this case. Fourth stage. Now the receiver of the message becomes the sender and begins to create message, and the cycle repeats. This can be repeated a dozen or so times, depending on how emotionally dysregulated the participants are and on how much each person truly cares about the situation. The biggest drawback of this interpersonal communication, besides requiring some courage, is just how long it can take. God, it can go on for so freaking long. That is why it's helpful to have someone as a mediator like the DM. Presumably you if you're watching this. The best outcome of these stages of interpersonal communication is for all parties present to come to an understanding of what each person perceives as a threat to them. Then they can move forward with trying to find a solution for each person's perspective. By threat, I don't mean like a physical danger, usually. That happens, but rarely. And it doesn't have to be a threat that others perceive as a true threat. Sometimes the threat someone feels is just a harsh tone in another player's voice. It could also be that someone is just afraid that if this issue isn't resolved, they won't be able to play anymore because people will think they're a jerk. The threat could be a removal of something they enjoy in that case. You could ask each person what emotions they feel, what needs they have that they think are not being met, or what would solve the argument or situation for them from their perspective. What are they trying to get out of the argument? A word on how people experience these threats. Something is perceived as dangerous or harmful because of a person's past experiences, values, and beliefs. This conflict of things that they hold as important or even sacred usually inspires fear or even pain, to which someone often responds with anger, or it sounds like anger. Then that anger gets expressed outside of themselves, and the fact that they are afraid is not communicated to other people. So usually once someone feels heard and cared about, tensions will relax, and the issues can be addressed for resolution directly. If you're going to use humor at any stage, humor or joining words or phrases could be used at this point for best effect. Like saying, dude, you guys are doing really great at this method of communication. Thank you for doing this. So let's resolve these issues as much as we can now. Or, all right, I'm ordering pizza after this because we all deserve it. I've actually done that one. Fifth stage. Now comes the resolution stage. There will almost always be some sort of bartering or negotiation going on here. Some people at this point will simply respond to the other person's fear or hurt with empathy and apologies. That's great. And it could be resolved right then and there. But if they're both still upset, it's unlikely. Psychotherapist Joyce Martyr, in 10 More Tips for Effective Conflict Resolution for the Huffington Post, suggests that these friends, I'm assuming they're friends of yours, she suggests that these friends let go of anything they feel is less important than their friendship. Encourage them to consider if each would rather be right than friends, and what would be lost in apologizing for hurt feelings. Help them reconnect and celebrate their friendship if they are willing to work it out. Now, I think this is a good value and sounds nice, but I found it isn't always necessary, and depending on who is present, it can be taken as manipulation. And if someone feels manipulated during a conversation that they've chosen to be vulnerable in, and they've been brave enough to ask for something they need, and then they feel manipulated, you can trust that they won't tell you that they feel that way, and they likely won't trust this situation, this group, or even you as a mediator ever again. So instead, asking each party what they feel would be fair as a resolution is a good place to start wrapping this up. Then once they've both said what they would like to see happen, you or they on their own can start to find a compromise and reach a resolution. The first time this happens between two specific people, it will take the longest, because presumably this is a new way of communicating for them. But if you do this process with your friends, and the issue gets resolved, even a very insecure person will likely feel good about staying with your group for a long time, and you won't have to find another member for your game or another friend. This has all been stuff that I've had to learn throughout my life, and many therapists and psychology classes and communication courses, so I hope it helps. If you'd like to ask me anything about it or disagree, feel free to leave a comment, or if you'd prefer, message me privately. I'm here to help you have a better experience at your table with your friends and have more quality in your game sessions. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk with you again soon.